My name is Richard Furr, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family, I'm cloud hired.
So I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Go Cloud Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glow Cloud team.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we're here to help you build your cloud computing career. Perhaps your goal is to become a cloud architect, or an AWS solutions architect, or an Azure architect, or a generative AI architect, or an enterprise architect. That's why we're here to assist you. My name's Michael Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I've been an architect now since, 25 plus years. It's been a long time. I've loved every last minute of it. I've spent 2 decades helping people just like you get your first tech job, get promoted in tech, negotiate that $100,000 raise, or that big stock grant that you're looking for, and I want to help you build your career. You know, I have graduates I've trained work at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and Microsoft and IBM and Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and a lot of prestigious organizations. And no matter who you are or where you're at or where you train, I want you to have that same level of success. And that's why we come here once or twice a week to answer your technology career questions, because I know that you can either have a career that goes off like this, if you know how to get there, or if you don't know how to get there and you don't have that expert guidance, it's going to be a zigzag where you're going to struggle to get to your goals. So that's why we do it. I am joined here with Mark Milovanovic. He's our Chief Technology Officer. He's also a Cisco certified internet expert like me and a network architect like me. Of course, he's also a cloud architect as well. So we're here Bring us your questions so we can help you. Before we begin answering your questions, there's a couple of things that I want to tell you about. Tomorrow, we are going to have our absolutely free How to Become a Generative AI Architect webinar, and it's going to be me and my good friend and expert architect, David Lithicum. He is the architect of our Generative AI Architect program, which has got all of his 30 plus years of AI knowledge and expertise, along with all of my knowledge on helping people prepare for the interviews, getting people groomed to what hiring managers desire, those leadership skills, those business skills, those executive skills. And we want to do everything we can to help you have the best career regardless of your training. So come join us tomorrow. It's free. It'll be on Zoom. We'll talk for about 30 minutes and we'll answer your questions for an hour and a half. We want all of you to have great careers. Please don't be shy asking your questions today. I also want to tell you about some other 3 things that we have for you. We have a lot of free networking training coming for you soon. So we have some free subnetting and networking workshops. I'm all excited about this. You know, the things that are going to be attached to this are going to be a networking, are going to be some subnetting and supernetting, because you're going to need to know how to not only break subnets down, but route aggregate. If you want any kind of job as a cloud architect or a cloud network architect, we have a BGP webinar coming. And in this BGP workshop, you're going to hear from 2 Cisco certified internet experts, me and Mark. We're going to have all kinds of fun on this. We'll go over the BGP protocol, how it works, how it operates, and Mark's going to give you some really cool demos. Mark's got a lot of network engineering experience as well, so we're going to have some fun with that. And of course, we're going to do an AWS Advanced Networking course after that, which is going to be free. You'll be able to sign up for it. If you sign up now, you'll be notified of it for either one of these free networking workshops. And we have 3 Cisco certified internet experts that are part of that with 50 years combined experience. We also have a Cisco certified network professional in there who also has about 10 years experience. So we're going to make sure you learn from the experts, and it's going to be completely free. And of course, we've got some documents in the description of this video on how to become an AI architect and how to get your first cloud architect job. They're completely free. Go download them, go build your career, and it's all courtesy of Go Cloud Careers. So we're going to answer your questions. Please ask them. Mark and I love building technology careers. And yeah, the last thing to say is that for right now, until April 30th, the Generative AI Architect program created by David Lithicum and not myself and the rest of the Go Cloud Careers team is on sale for 50% off, which means that it's going to be, the cost is less than 1.5 days pay for our average graduate in one of these careers. So take advantage of it, build your career. So whoever's behind the scenes, I think it's Tyrone, start bringing in some of our questions and ask us your questions so we can assist you in building your career.
All right, looks like CloudStation is going to start us off. And they ask, as a cloud architect, how can one stay current with the rapid evolving cloud technologies and integrate them into an architectural design?
So CloudStation, it's a great question. And let's talk about how you do this and how you do this easily. If you were trained via certification training and you learned the name of a service and how to configure that service, you're never really going to learn the technology itself. And you're always going to be chasing that next thing, and it's going to be terrifying. But if you actually understand the technology and at the essential level understand what is the technology, how does the technology work, and why do we truly use it, at the how it works level, you're never going to have this problem. CloudStation, what if I told you in the 1970s they were time-sharing mainframes? Which is basically taking a mainframe, which was a server that had a whole lot of memory and a whole lot of compute, and allowing multiple customers to use it. Wait, that's cloud computing, and it was in the 1970s. CloudStation, what if I told you that in 1993 I worked on ISDN networks, which were a cloud, and then in around 1996 I worked on frame relay networks, which were also a cloud, and then after that I worked on the BGP cloud, the ATM cloud, the VPLS cloud, and of course I helped consult on the design of all these clouds. And all cloud computing really is renting space in someone's network in a data center. So CloudStation, if you truly understand it, those same storage area networks we've been using for decades, block storage, object storage, and file storage, are the same things that we use on cloud computing. How about relational databases? They're 30, 40 years old. How about NoSQL databases? They're also 30 to 40-year-old technology. How about the security appliances we do? Things like encryption, 20, 30-year-old technology, actually older than that. Well, all the technology in the cloud is really just networking and data center technology with less features that have been virtualized. Now, when you actually understand that, if your fundamentals are really good and you understand what a private line is, and you learned that private line 30 years ago, and now AWS comes up with a direct connection, you realize that it's really the same 30-year-old technology that you've worked with for the last 30 years. So you've got to get really good. Now, what has changed Cloud Station? The speeds and the performance of these systems. So, when I started out, our routers had, a 25 megahertz CPU, and they had a couple of megabytes of DRAM, like 16 if it was a good router. And, with that, we were very limited in what we can do. We couldn't take in that many routes. The performance, we'd be able to push 1.5 meg, I'm not joking, through the first router I ever worked on, and that was big. And now we can push terabytes per second through some of these bigger devices. So the compute performance went up. The CPU performance is probably up about 1,000 times since I started my career, if not more. Same thing for DRAM performance. In fact, Cloud Station, the first data center that I really helped set up, it was for the world's largest market maker. They processed about 3 to 4 billion trades per day on the NASDAQ. And, we had data centers that were about 100 meters long and 100 meters wide per floor. And we had like 6 floors, but we had 4 terabytes of data, and that was huge. Now sitting in my Mac workstation, I've got a 32 terabyte NVMe RAID array that's attached to it, and 96 terabyte NAS to store some of our videos. And I've got about 8 terabytes of storage just inside my little Mac, which is like this big because it's Mac Studio. So when you think about it, that's really what's changed. So you've got to understand, what is the tech, how does the tech work, and then you're always going to be there. And even if you think about AI, which is new, and honestly, it's exciting. I first worked on AI systems in around 2000 for a bank that was using it to do what they call black box trading, which is buy and sell stocks and options based upon what was going on in the news and historical things. David Lithicum, who's the architect of our AI Architect program, has been working with AI since the late 80s, early 90s. So all this stuff is really reiteration. So now, Cloud Station, let's talk about the new feature of the day, the new AWS press release. What is that really? It's the same stuff as the old thing, but maybe a new feature was needed for a client that was missing, because we have to remember the cloud is a virtual network and a virtual data center. And by that, it offers us less. We have less features. We have less functionality than we did in the data center. And when people would migrate to the cloud and they didn't have what they needed, the only thing that would really be there was, so they'd go to the cloud and it was like, I can't really do this. So they'd have an objection. And then, of course, you'd see a Google, a Microsoft, or an AWS create a new feature. And now it's a thing for a big press release. It's all exciting. It's something to talk about in the conferences, but it's really the same technology. So they're not rapidly evolving. They feel rapidly evolving if you were there. I see it every day on LinkedIn. The person says, oh, wow, look at this exciting feature. With AWS, you can get the equivalent of a private line with Private Link. Now, that was exciting, to be fair. And around 1999, 2000, when Luca Martini over at Juniper came up with something called the Martini Tunnel, which was how you would create a private line over an IP network. But in 2024, it's 25-year-old technology practically. So there's really nothing new in cloud computing. Now, it doesn't mean I don't love cloud computing. I love the fact that it's pre-made. I love the fact that there's some APIs that are there that are very simple to work with. I love the fact that there's some language models that are large language models that are already there that are going to make life easier. And I love the agility of the cloud. And it's the agility of the cloud that's there. But the tech itself, not so new. And if you learn your good fundamentals and you understand how it works, you'll always be prepared. If you go to the Internet Engineering Task Force, and they've got specifications for everything, there's an RFC called 1925. And in that, they say what is old is new again. Mainframes are coming back. Private clouds are coming back, going back to the data center for greater performance, greater security, and lower costs. And we cloud architects are at the center of all of it. So it's exciting times. And I hope I answered your question at Cloud Station. Please feel free to ask more.
I'm going to add something for this, for Cloud Station, briefly on this. You also got to remember there's going to be a difference if you're going to be a solution engineer or an architect and a cloud architect or just a network or some other type of architect. If you're stuck and you have to promote a solution, then it's going to feel a lot more like a rat race where it's never ending, because that's how that particular business is going to make money. is going to be able to put out products that they believe are going to help people.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to spend time on getting up to date with what it is that whatever they're trying to sell, which is going to involve reading documentation, trying to figure out what are the selling points to those customers that you're going to have in front of you. So there's going to be a bit more of a fast-paced environment when you're like a solution engineer and architect.
Yeah.
But as a cloud architect or just a general enterprise architect, you're a trusted advisor.
Yeah.
So your first thought would be about any type of new technology. New, I put it with quotations mark, new, is not to be hasty and jump on the next hype, right? We're seeing right now what AI is doing to people, right? To organizations, they're trying to jump on it, not really understanding it. They don't really know how to secure the systems. They also don't really know what are the weaknesses and the strengths, but somebody wants to make money of it. So it's being pushed. And then in that sense, also people are suffering because they're losing jobs to a system that has not been proven yet. Okay, so you have to figure out what is reality and what is just the hype. What is what they're trying to sell you on? And when you think of your customers, especially once you get into the millions and potentially billions of dollars of revenue that this customer is trying to generate, you don't want to just jump on anything because there's a lot more busts than there is successes. So how do you stay on top of it? Do your research. Always know that nobody's rushing you to adopt anything. Aside, if you're working for a vendor, they want you to push the solution. But if you're working for your customers, always think about what's best for them. Not how you can fit the technology, but how you can fit the technology based on a need. If there is no need, guess what? The technology is not necessary. So that would be my advice. Great question, Cloud Station.
Please ask us your questions. We want to help you. And then Tyrone, bring up the next one.
Yep. Next question from Cloud Station. He says, can you share your insights on the future trends in cloud architecture and how they might influence enterprise IT strategies?
Absolutely, Cloud Station. And, to tell you about the future, I'm going to talk about what we talked about several years ago. Several years ago, we said that hybrid clouds and hybrid multi-clouds were going to be the future. We said that a single cloud didn't provide the availability. A single cloud would lock customers in with proprietary solutions, and a single cloud wouldn't give the customers the best opportunities because there's some things that Azure does so much better than AWS. There's some things that AWS does better than Azure, and there's some things that Google does better than both of them. And that likewise, the converse is also true. So, where is it going? Organizations have finally listened and they've realized that cloud computing costs on average 250% of what it costs to do it in the data center. Now, that doesn't mean cloud computing isn't worth it. The agility is definitely worth it for many organizations. But it means that compute-heavy workloads are going back to the data center. And why compute-heavy? I can buy a server from Dell for about $600,000, which is going to cost me about $5 to $10 million to run in the cloud over the course of about 4 years. That same server, which is 600, is going to cost me more than 6 million. For that, those workloads that run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we're going to bring them back into the data center because it's just so much cheaper. Not only is it cheaper, the performance, if we're going to deal with block storage on the cloud, we can get 250,000 IOPS with the fastest AWS IO2 devices. But in my server in the data center, I get about 19 million IOPS. So we're not even in the same universe. Plus, there's the latency going back and forth to the cloud, which we don't have in the data center. So we're seeing a lot of workloads go back to the cloud, which is great, the data center, which is great for us cloud architects, because we're just building them in OpenStack or we're designing them in OpenStack or in Nutanix cloud. So we're good to go. Now, where is going to the cloud? There was some very interesting news from JPMorgan Chase. JPMorgan Chase avoided the public cloud because of cost purposes. And yes, the AI on my computer is just a little wacky and I can't shut it down. JPMorgan Chase said they were saving $2.5 billion by creating a private cloud versus the public cloud. And they just announced that all their AI is going to go to the public cloud. So AI architects, generative AI architects, which is why we're training them, big opportunity. And I'd say for every cloud architect, they need to understand AI because that's going to be one of the big drivers. It's one of the most disruptive technologies in a good way for what we're doing. So there's AI. We're also getting into the world of the security environment. Look, people went to the cloud. They thought the cloud was cheaper, which is insane. A cloud is just somebody else's data center, but it's a higher value target. So there's many more attacks scored towards the cloud. Plus, in the cloud, there's less security things you can do. You can't do the same kind of network admission control. You can't do things like QoS or rate limiting or traffic policing or any of those other things. So we have less things we can do in the cloud for security, but we can then micro-segment and take our organizations, they make 500 VPCs instead of having one thing, and we can micro-segment that way. So that brings us into the SASE world and the software-defined networking WAN world for connecting all these VPCs. And that brings us into some overlay networks as well. Now, I can also tell you the demand for Architect's Cloud Station is going up, 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 and up. And here's the reason. All these new technologies create jobs for architects. We're the only people that bridge in between the business needs and the technology solutions. So there's that. And Cloud Station, we've been teaching it forever because, I've been an architect forever. But the people that hybrid, like I'm going to be half architect, half engineer, that's gone. 70% of projects on the cloud and off the cloud fail to do anything for the business. Meaning, imagine spending billions of dollars and getting nothing for it. Meaning the cloud's been hurting people, not because the cloud's bad, because the architecture's been bad. So we're seeing a huge demand for much more business acumen, much more leadership skills, much more executive skills, much more presence skills, more CXO relevancy in the architects. And we're also seeing a lot higher salaries that go along with it. So all these things are absolutely good. And the last part of it is, we've got a lot of economic variability going on right now. And I don't see that ending anytime soon. And because cloud, specifically cloud, has all that agility, spin up, spin down, and all that GPU compute capacity is there. GPUs with Google, GPUs with AWS or in the data center, some new actually CPU-based things, and there's some trends with FPGAs, fully programmable ASICs, which are slower than regular ASICs, but give us more opportunities. These things are exciting too. So all that means more AI, it means more big data, it means more data science, and it means organizations adopting data, enhancing their productivity. It also means getting rid of some back-end engineering people that are writing code and hands-on things. Not the best of the engineers, they're always going to be secure, always. But I'm talking about the bottom 20 or 30%, they're going to be replaced by AI, but not architects, because, as we architects, we're focusing on getting the business from the vision, learning the business processes, managing stakeholders, leading teams, selling, presenting, and AI can't do any of that. So it's just more opportunities for architects, more tools for us to optimize the business, and more money for the career. All good things, Cloud Station. Please, if you guys have questions or gals have questions, ask them in the chat box. We want to help you build your career. Don't be shy. We don't bite. We're not scary people.
Now, neither Mike or I could foretell the future. Would be really advantageous if we could. But the reality is really what's going to be trending is going to be making networking and security more efficient and more dominant when it comes to anything cloud related, right? So with people going back to their data centers, going to on-premises, connectivity is going to be the key. How do we get connectivity to be fast, efficient, low latency, less delay, but also secure? Because now we got to factor in how we're going to work on anything AI related. If we have a hybrid workload where we have some on-premise and some in the data center or the cloud, or virtual data center, we're going to have to be able to somewhere secure that. So security is going to be a big proponent for that. And that's what you also slowly see a lot of vendors focusing on is how do we go from, and this is whipsaw, Mike knows this, has seen it for over 30 years, on going from a centralized type of security system going to more of a distributed system. And eventually that's going to probably morph into somewhat of a hybrid system anyway, where you have the ability to have like little firewalls that move with the different workloads. That's what they're trying to implement anyway, especially something that interacts at the kernel level of an operating system. And then having a controller, very similar to what software-defined networking is already doing, kind of overseeing that kind of transition with security. But definitely networking, connectivity, and security is going to be the trending piece in the future, and that's going to impact the enterprise because we're bringing a lot of the workloads back. And since it's still going to be north-south type traffic, meaning to a data center to our premise, it doesn't matter if it's your data center or somebody else's, we're going to have to really figure out how do we bolster up our enterprise infrastructure, or at least the edge of our enterprise. Cloud Doctor, do cloud architects need to know networking in depth or only the fundamentals?
Okay, great question, Cloud Doctor. Let's talk about what a cloud is. Somebody else's network and someone else's data center. So if you don't understand the network in the data center, you really can't design it. You just can't. So I would say every cloud architect needs to know about 2 to 3 times what's covered in the AWS Advanced Networking. That's kind of like an intro to networking. And we like to use that as an intro to junior level cloud networking. If you know double that, you probably have enough, and that's networking fundamentals there. So I don't expect an average architect to know networking like Mark or I. Mark or I are network architects. And that's really what we focus on, the network, the network, the network. But let's talk about what you do need to know, Cloud Doctor. You must know IP addressing, subnetting, and supernetting, because if the IP addressing and the IP address plan is wrong, the entire architecture will come to a crashing halt. So we can't have that. You will have to understand BGP. You just will. Because without understanding BGP, you're not going to be able to set up your routing. And if your routing is wrong, your systems won't be reachable and it will fail. You're also going to need to understand your wide area networks to connect to the cloud. And whether that be a private line or a VPN or a software-defined WAN or a SASE WAN, you're going to need to know them. You're also going to have some decent knowledge of Ethernet and Ethernet signaling, either at the 1 gig link or the 10 gig link. You probably need to understand some VLANs for some VLAN tagging and trunking, because you're going to need that when you connect to them. It would be good if you understood some spanning tree, because you're going to have more than one link and you can't have loops that are going to be there. So you need to know those at minimum. And you really need to, at minimum, understand NAT. And it's not like just in a NAT gateway going out to the internet. It's going to be what one company buys another company and they're using the same IP addresses. That's going to be a nightmare. So you're going to need to understand NAT. They would be the networking fundamentals that you can use and that you need. And I mean, look, once we get past this, Mark and I would go get geeky in MPLS traffic engineering or all kinds of fancy route reflector architectures and BGP confederations with route reflectors, that kind of stuff you don't need. That now a cloud network architect absolutely would. But for the average cloud architect, they're designing systems. They need to understand the networking and the data center components. And they're the key networking components you need to understand, which coincidentally, we're teaching free, a free subnetting workshop, a free BGP workshop, and a free AWS Advanced Networking. Kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, and I know many times we go for certifications, they give us some type of check on our competency. I would put it this way. A lot of this stuff, once you get past the marketing fluff, I think the hardest thing about anything cloud related is the marketing stuff and just trying to figure out, okay, what does this marketing term actually mean in layman's terms? Like compute engine, oh, okay, that's a virtual machine, something that makes sense to us normal human beings. Once you get past that, what I've heard a lot of people say, and this has been also my experience, that a lot of the general cloud networking tech that's being used is at a CCNA level. So I would probably say is if you're comfortable with that type of depth of information at the CCNA level, which a lot of it is generally high level overview with some configuration, some implementation, but it's not horrendous when it comes to that. I think you're on very good footing. Yeah. If you want to take that another notch, and let's say you wanted to slowly kind of migrate towards being more specialized towards the actual networking side on a cloud provider or even with a partner of theirs, I would probably say a CCNP and enterprise would be really good, because then you get exposure to BGP. You would get exposure to MPLS tunnels, the VPN tunnels, which kind of teach you the idea about segmentation, which is always good to know, especially at a routing level, not just at the data link level. And you get some high level overview of MPLS so that you kind of get like an idea of what type of private line kind of connectivity or WAN connectivity do I have. But realistically speaking, you would still require to go out and get some fundamental understanding of data centers. And I would say there, keep it very simple, do a high level overview when it comes to the actual storage options that we have in the data center. Understand some virtualization, because that is part of the data center. Mike already touched on overlay networking. So that's going to be present both at the WAN side and at your LAN. but especially in your data center, because that's where you want that type of automation to be present. It's going to be a lot easier to manage. And as a cloud architect, you will need to know that anyway, because if you're designing systems that are going to have to integrate with virtualization, it doesn't matter if it's VM, if it's containers and so forth, but also how the routing happens, that's where you would need to know that.
Yeah.
Aside from that, wherever you get in somewhere, then it's going to be dependent on what type of solution they use. If they use a Juniper data center virtualization solution, you go with that. If something Cisco, you go from that. But generally speaking, you will need to know something about data centers and some storage. And then Mike always loves to throw in databases. I'm not as skilled as he is in the databases, but yeah, I guess some fundamentals of databases would work. But definitely CCNA level, I would recommend that to anyone. Want to be a little bit more specialized, go up to the CCNP level. And as Mike mentions, we're going to have the advanced networking bootcamp anyway coming up, our little workshop. So you're going to get some great fundamentals there, but know that we have to go a little bit beyond that because it's just not simply enough to really be a competent person when it comes to that kind of job that you're going to have, especially at the architect level. You'll have to know a lot more breadth than depth when it comes to the different technologies and solutions.
And Cloud Doctor, when he mentioned CCNA level, I want to put it into context. An AWS Solutions Architect Professional can be summarized in 500 pages, official documents. The CCNA is 2,000 pages of reading. So it's actually 4 times what the AWS Solutions Architect Professional actually is in terms of content. And that's what he's saying is the intro level. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You know, it's sad that the cloud certifications don't really teach you architecture. They teach you a name of a service and how to configure that, which architects don't do. The other sad part of it is that they don't teach you how the technologies work. It's just here how to configure. And as an architect, you need to understand it. So don't get too scared about the networking. It's really not that big of a deal. We're going to be doing the free subnetting, which is one of those main CCNA components. We're going to do the free BGP, which isn't covered in the CCNA, but it's absolutely essential knowledge. And, you know, we have a team of CCIEs that are going to help teach that AWS Advanced Networking. And our CCIEs know networking so well that they'll explain it, and it's going to be so simple for you. It'll just be like, you know, what do they call it? A piece of cake. Sorry, I don't eat sugar, but I know people talk about a piece of cake and cake. So I guess it's like that. For me, it'd be eating like fruit because I eat a lot of fruit.
And I'm going to tell this to everybody because we all have this. The reality is the more you know, the easier it's going to be to pick up some things because you have a lot more information that you can already attach to new information. But let's say you don't have that. Give it some time. Whatever it is that you're learning, give it a little time and keep the mentality that it's okay for you not to know. You're going to feel a little dumb because you don't understand it immediately. Just understand it's a process. It takes some time. But if you stick to it, you give it effort, over time, you'll see that these concepts are going to become clearer and clearer and clearer. And it doesn't matter if it's networking related, if it's data center related, security, DevOps, whatever it may be. Just give it a little bit of time and be patient. It will click sooner or later.
Tyrone, if you're back there, can we take does design out of order? Because that question, if it's not answered, could be potentially dangerous for someone. And I really want to make sure that we help everybody on here. So the question is,
go ahead. I'll read it for you, Mike. So it's from, let me see if I can read it. Dara does design. Hi, I'm a senior UX designer starting my pivot into cloud security with the eventual goal of becoming a cloud security architect. How can I bridge current UX skills with cloud security?
Dora does design. I want to make it clear. Your next job, if you train properly, could be a cloud security architect. So you need to train for that. Now let's talk about what goes into security architecture. There's the business component, which you need to learn. And there's the system design component, which you need to learn. And Dara does design. I'm going to tell you this right now. You're not going to work as a security engineer and learn anything about security architecture. You're going to learn security engineering. So explain this. And the reason I say this is right now you work on computers, right? You know how to code. And you've been using it every single day, but that's hands-on engineering. As an architect, it's not how to. It's the underlying technology, why, and the underlying technology works. So Dara, I'm going to give you the business piece, and I'm going to give you the technology piece. But everybody that comes from engineer is always obsessed with hands-on. All this hands-on is going to get me there. And we tell people that, well, they don't understand. So Dora by design. You use your PC or your Mac or your Linux machine every day, which means you know how to use it, right? Now, my question is, you probably don't know how it works. You think you do, but you don't. Now, as an architect, it's all about how it works, not how to configure, which is why engineering is generally poor preparation for architecture. Train to be an architect and you'll be an architect. But I'll just give you the example. You're on your PC, right? Or your Mac or your whatever. Tell me about your CPU. Tell me about what those cores do and how the intercommunication between those cores is. Tell me about the level 1, level 2, and level 3 cache that's on that CPU and how it works. Tell me how that CPU integrates and interacts with your DRAM and how DRAM loads that into memory. Talk to me about the number of PCIe lanes on that CPU and how that's going to pertain to how many GPUs you could potentially do and how much GPU parallel computing you can do in an artificial environment. While we're at it, talk to me about the NVMe drives and how they interface with the motherboard versus a SATA or a SAS drive. Now, the reason I said this, because you can configure all day long and you're not going to learn anything about architecture, you're going to learn configuring. So Dora does by design, you need the business components and the technology components, and you need to learn architecture. Dora does design. I've got cloud engineers with 10 years experience, and it takes me just as much time to make them a cloud architect as it does as a nurse. About 6 to 12 months to train an architect. And I've got people with zero experience working everywhere, including a security architect. So let's start with the business skills you need. Because remember, we're not engineering. And then we'll talk about your current knowledge, where it'll help and where it won't help. You must understand how to speak with executives to be an architect, because we must know the vision of the business. Now, as an architect, we need to understand their business processes, how the business operates, because whatever we do is going to change it. Now, you want to be a security architect, you need to understand what you're protecting, right? You know, you're not going to spend $1 billion to protect a cat. I mean, my cat, I would go to extensive things to protect my cat, but generally speaking, an organization will spend $1 billion on a security architecture to protect $10 billion of intellectual property, but they're not going to do it for something that's worth $50,000. So you're going to need to learn how to quantify the organization's security risks. The risks of a breach, quantifiable in terms of money, where you'll calculate like the annual loss expectations and things like that, which is basically some probability and statistics that we do as architects all the time. It's very simple, but you need to be trained to it. You need to be able to then understand, if you quantify the information, you need to be able to walk through all the key stakeholders in the organization and how they understand how the business works, why it works. Because as soon as you throw a firewall in there, or an access control list, or a new identity and access management system, you're going to break the business. You need to understand the business first. You understand how that operates. Now, as an architect, you're going to give presentations pretty much every day. You're going to be writing a lot of thought leadership documentation and things like that. All of that is going to be on the business side. So lots of presentations, and you're going to have to sell, negotiate. So make sure you learn that. You're not going to learn that by being an engineer, and I want you to get to your goal. Now, on this side, you know, the security engineers, which is why I say it's not going to teach you engineering, are focused on the configuration. Architects, we don't configure, we don't touch the technology. So understanding that, understand what are you going to be doing as a security architect. You're going to be designing a security policy for the entire organization. You're going to be assessing their people and looking for gaps in their people and determining what kind of people training needs. Maybe some anti-social engineering training, for example, some anti-phishing training, some general cybersecurity things. You're going to be evaluating the organization's physical security as well. You're going to be determining what the organization's encryption strategy needs to be from a privacy perspective. And I'm not just talking about encrypted storage, and I'm not talking about just TLS encryption. What about encryption over the network, for example, going from point A to point B, the data centers to the cloud? You're going to need to understand that. Now, you're also going to have good knowledge of designing your demilitarized zones, strong knowledge of setting up remote access and how to make that work, strong knowledge of SIEM systems where they're going to be collecting logs so you can correlate events and event management and figure out where hacking events are coming through. Lots of knowledge on IDS, IPS systems, and where and how to integrate them. So this is a job by design. So, you know, we train cloud security architects and we get them hired every day. And we've got plenty of people like Delroy Batt, who never worked in tech, who got his first cloud security. Richard, who recently got his first cloud security architect job. Robert Welch, who got a cloud security architect. We train lots of cloud security architects in our cloud security program, but there's there. Now let's talk about your current skills. Your current skills are user experience, which are very good skills. And chances are you know some code as well. Now, there's absolutely no coding in architecture, but when it comes to designing an entire security architecture, there are certain things from the coding world that would be helpful. Might be less than 5% of what we do, but there's things like input validation in secure codes and understanding code repos and with the repositories of where it's at, and understanding how to make secure comments versus not making comments in your code and where it needs to be. So you'll be able to take that with you, which is about 5%. Sadly, architecture and coding don't really have anything together, but you'll be able to take the 5%, but the rest of it's new. Now, the reality is your architecture is, if you ever get involved in something that requires UX design, and architecture is a team sport, so you're always going to be bringing people in, will be beneficial. But understand life is cumulative. Whatever you've learned is good, but it's a different career. Because what you're really asking me is, Mike, I've been an attorney for the last 10 years, and now I want to be a physician. What do I need to do? You need to go to medical school and learn to be a physician. It's just a different career. But here's the case. You can do it. Doesn't matter where you're at. And when you have experience, it does make it easier to get hired. I mean, look, I deal with someone like a Daniel Bosu, 20 years old, didn't graduate high school, and we still got him hired at JP Morgan Chase as an architect. Now I deal with a Noah Parker, who was a social worker, got him his first job as an architect. But then I also deal with people like Pratipal Sejan, who had a lot of coding experience, which has nothing to do with architecture, and we got him his first architect job after we trained him. So you've got good experience. It's valuable experience, but it's in a different career. So how do you go from one career to the new career? You learn the skills for the new career. You go out there and conquer that career, and I promise you it's going to be something you love. But please, I beg you, don't think that you're just going to get there by working as a security engineer, because that's going to teach you somebody else's job. And let's face it, I don't care how good of an airplane mechanic you are when it's time to fly an airplane. It's still a different job. It's still a different career. And I can tell you, after training architects now that work at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and IBM and Google and Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, British Broadcasting Company, JP Morgan Chase, CDW, Arrow Electronics, you name it. When they want an architect, they've got a very specific thing that they're looking for, not engineer. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
I agree with Mike in a sense that you need to reverse engineer both careers and then try to map what is similar between them. As Mike mentioned, when it comes to actual user experience, the idea of having to interact with users, gathering information about what works, what didn't work with them, you may have to run surveys. So those are all these interpersonal skills that are going to translate well. And then you have to find little niches. Like, for example, maybe you were part of the team that created the wire framing or the prototypes for the actual design, and you had to create the high and the low fidelity designs. Well, that's also a function of what an actual architect does. You create designs, and then they have to be presented to see if they would fit and if the stakeholders would get on board with them. So those will be transferable skills. Now, there is not much security at all when it comes to user experience, really. So the security skills are going to be what you want to look afterwards at and see where your gaps in, do your gap analysis, and then work towards gaining that knowledge. But a lot of the what we call soft skills, those are you're going to be able to transfer, but you need to be honest with yourself in regards to what is it that I actually did that was part of my job at this time. Because if you didn't work in the wireframing or the prototyping, but rather, let's say you were more on the testing end, that's not going to be very transferable because you're not going to be very hands-on when it comes to the tech as an architect. So just be honest, reverse engineer it, and then see what, especially those interpersonal skills, that you can translate into your new career. Great question. All right, from Big Jerry, it says, Mike and Mark, and anyone else at Go Cloud, what makes you get up every morning and do this? It has to be tiring. Mike, you
Big
get
Jerry, I'll
please.
start it off, and then we'll go to Mark. So Big Jerry, here's the thing. I grew up extremely poor. I actually had 2 full-time jobs when I was in college. And that was just so I could pay my way through school and not have debt. And I remember what that took out of me. It honestly took $300,000 of education to be the kind of architect that I actually am. And it hit me with 2 things. One, when I was younger, it was the biggest thing I could do to pay for school. And 2, I realized that not everybody was willing to work 2 full-time jobs and then some work on the side just to be able to pay for school. So I wanted people to get the $300,000 to $500,000 jobs where they could truly make an impact on their life, where they could send money back home. Like, I'm from Greece, we send money back home to my relatives in Greece. I wanted people to be able to build some generational wealth. And I really wanted people to get the respect. Sadly, you got a great engineer. The engineer works their tail off, and they just don't get the respect. And the architect, works half the hours of the engineer, earns double the money or triple the money, and they get treated like royalty wherever they go. And I wanted to share those secrets so other people could have these great jobs. And Big Jerry, the key for us is we stick with people and we get them hired. When people enter our program, we let them stay in our program until they're hired. Those boot camps that are out there kick people out after 16 weeks and don't care. We've got people in our program until the day they are hired. So for me, Big Jerry 23, it's all about getting hired. It's all about changing lives. Big Jerry, in my youth, I practiced internal medicine. I wanted to help people. Prior to practicing internal medicine, I was a firefighter paramedic. I wanted to help people. And when I started my tech career, I'm not joking, it cost me about $40,000 to do my CCIE. I borrowed money from my brother. I borrowed money from my father-in-law. I worked triple and shifts. I did it, and I did it so I could start, but I didn't want anybody to do it. So Big Jerry, every time somebody gets a big job, it's kind of like winning the lottery to me. It's like the first time I started in technology and I got that first job. And I remember I told my wife, I went on this interview, I got a job. Now we can have our vacation home in Palm Beach that I always wanted. And that to me was just so exciting that I just love it. I've got people that come over from all over the world, people that start with nothing, and people that have so much by the time we're done. Look, I have people that come to us that have lots of things too, and they get better. But, for me, changing lives, helping people, that's the only reason I do it. And, it's funny, when I offered Mark a job, and then I'll let Mark go there. Mark's a CCIE. We're a school. So we can't necessarily pay, what a CCIE can earn on the in the enterprise world. And when I spoke to Mark and I said, Mark, would you be interested? And he said, as long as I'm helping people, I'm going to be happy. And when Mark said that to me, I knew I had to hire him, whether how we'd find a way to figure it out. So, but now I'll let Mark talk about it. But that's one of the conversations that I remember, and I remember these things like they're yesterday.
Exactly. Yeah, I've done my tour, as they say, and for some reason, when you get into most kind of careers, people believe that you need to pay your dues, and they get very, very touchy about it to the point where they'll engineer you to suffer, to go through hardships. And having gone through that myself and seeing how it was done to others, I genuinely hated it. I dislike people being shouted upon just because they feel like it's some kind of rite of passage. And I don't also believe in holding back opportunities from people. I think everyone should have opportunity and then be able to work towards gaining the results of those opportunities. So when Mike spoke to me too, I told him there's more happiness in giving than there's in receiving. I genuinely believe that. I mean, we all have to pay our bills, so don't get me wrong, right? So part of it is getting up in the morning. You want to pay those pieces of paper that you get in the mail or electronically. But it generally, it feels good knowing that you can do your little part in helping make somebody's life a little easier and help them maybe get somewhere where others have told them they couldn't do it. Because maybe you've been in that position, and that's been the case for me. I remember that I never dreamed of becoming a CCIE. Never dawned on me. It was really just like more like an overnight thing that kind of came to me and says like, let's go try it. But prior to that, I gave up networking probably for, 10 years. I gave it up. I went into something different and then circled back to it, and I never looked back. But I know how tough it is. I love helping people. And knowing that it genuinely makes a difference for them and helps them, especially when others have told them not, it's indescribable when you see that happening. Just one person telling you thank you, it means the world. It genuinely does mean the world. Thank you for that question.
Great questions, ask your questions. We want to help.
So from Fola Shaki, how important are writing skills for the architect?
Fola Shaki, they're critical. So let's talk about things we don't do as architects. We don't code, we don't configure, we don't do anything hands-on. Here's what we do every day. We go to lots of meetings. We've got some presentations. We write a lot of documents, and that could be responding to an RFI, RFP, RFQ. It could be writing a white paper. It could be writing a thought leadership document. So we write every day. So how important are writing skills for the architect? Absolutely critical. And in fact, the reason so many people struggle, and the reason they struggle to become architects, is they go get jobs where they implement things all day long. And implementation doesn't teach you system design. And, I wish it did. I really wish it did, but it doesn't. But writing, you will be writing all day because, here's the thing. In a cloud architecture, since we don't build anything, we got to go find out from the executives the vision of their business. Now we've got to document that somewhere. Then we've got to document the business processes. And then we've got to send it back to the client and make sure they agree with the current business processes. Then we're going to go figure out how we want the business to operate in the future, which now means we've got to document future business processes and make sure the customer buys off on it. Then we're going to need to go baseline the technology, bringing in some engineers to do it. We architects don't touch the tech. And we're going to have to document the current environment. And then we're going to have to work backwards from the business goals and the business processes after looking at the current environment to figure out what the delta is or what the change is between the current technology state and what they need for the business. Then we need to write up this document, which is an architecture document, and it's going to have lots of charts in it, and it's going to explain everything in that architecture. We're then going to have to usually respond to an RFI, RFP, RFQ, which is another form of a architect document. Then we're going to have to create a governance structure and a statement of work. And that's why the architect is an executive job. We do a lot of pencil pushing in our job, so to speak. We do a tremendous amount of writing. So writing skills are absolutely critical. And a lot of times, Folashaki, I get people with 20 years of engineering experience and they want to become architects. And here's the thing. We have to start training them architecture versus engineering. And 50% of what we need to do is teaching that writing, that presentation, that sales, that communication, that leadership. So you may not need to know how to code to be an architect, and I'm not convinced that coding provides any benefit to being an architect as a cloud architect. Now, being an application architect, sure, but being a cloud architect, no, because we're doing network and data center stuff, not coding anything. But writing, very critical.
I would say it's a core skill.
Yeah.
You can't, and I know your specific question was in regards to architects, but I actually firmly believe that writing is a core skill in any vocation. I actually would say, even as an engineer, as a manager, I would say as any of those, writing, be very good at it. And the reason I mention that, as I moved up in my career too, even as part of the engineering tree, the higher I got, the less hands-on I was. Yes. Meaning the less command line stuff I was typing, and the more actual documentation I was typing up. I was more worried about actually doing investigations on incidents. That also took investigation, writing it up, proving it, presenting it. And the same holds true for anything as you get higher, is that these communication skills, either if they're going to be verbal or written, are going to be paramount. Those are going to be your core skills no matter where you go when it comes to that. So I would definitely recommend, or even almost insist, that you spend every day some time improving your writing skills and your communication skills above anything else. Spend maybe 50 minutes on writing, 50 minutes on your verbal skills every day, and then try to fit everything around that. And I think that's going to serve you well as pretty much anything, but especially as an architect, that's going to be at the forefront at the customer experience.
So before we get to the next question, if you've got questions, please bring them here. Mark and I want to help you with your career. Also, as a reminder that tomorrow, my team will pop a link in the description. We have a completely free How to Become a Generative AI Architect webinar with me and David Lithicum. We currently have 50% off on our Generative AI Architect program until the end of the month because it's pre-launch. And please make sure to join us for some of the free networking training that we're doing. The link for that is in the description of the video, and my team will pop it in the chat box. Now, Mark, you want to read that question, and let's go have fun and answer it.
And I'll just briefly add this. Even if you're not interested in becoming a Gen AI architect, let's say this, but you just want to learn something about artificial intelligence to begin with, be sure to come to that webinar because you're going to learn a little bit and see if it's even your fancy. You'll definitely enjoy it. Anyway, so question from 2N Hughes. Mike, have you noticed any hiring or lack thereof trends this year so far?
So 2N Hughes, I want to get back to something that I said 2 years ago. If you had paid attention to our YouTube channel, we issued several warnings. We said, please move into customer-facing roles. Please leave engineering and move into architect roles. And we said it for this reason. We knew layoffs were coming of the engineering and the non-customer facing people. And what are the trends that we've seen? We've seen exactly like we said, back office engineers being laid off, which we predicted would happen. And 2N Hughes, I don't know if you'll recall, we stopped selling our cloud engineering program about 1.5 years ago because we knew there was going to be cloud engineering layoffs for both the outsourcing component, which is big, for engineering, and also the AI component, because AI can write a Terraform script, a CloudFormation script, a Python script, a Bash script, and we realized that. So when you start to look at companies like IBM, they're still hiring for their back-end roles. AWS is still hiring architects every day. Microsoft is still hiring architects. So the key is there's still extreme hiring in the world of the architect space. Now, 2N Hughes, I'm also going to give you a secret. I'm being a tech manager, hiring people and needing to fire people that are appropriate. Thankfully, I've not had to fire too many people in my career. All organizations stack rank their employees from the bottom to the top. 100% of all organizations do it. And it was very common for the last 2 to 3 decades. It started with Jack Welch from GE, that they would get rid of or lay off the bottom 10% of all employees every year. Cisco did it, and all the tech companies did it. And why did they do it? Because the top 90% of the employees really contribute to the organization. And the bottom 10% actually typically don't do any work, or the work they do is poor and has to be reworked by other members of the team. And ultimately, because of that, what happens is, let's say Mark works for me, and Mark is good. And I've got somebody else on the team that's doing nothing. What do I do as a manager? I can't give it to that person that's doing nothing. They can't do anything. I have to give it to Mark. And then I overwork Mark until Mark quits, if I don't lay off the bottom 10%. And then I've got all the people that couldn't get other jobs working for me. So the best companies will always lay off the bottom 10%. They've done it for decades. It's not that they don't care about the people. It's because they need to be strong, and they need to make sure they can survive, and all those employees there can be well taken care of. So we're still seeing people getting hired. And it was like 2 weeks ago, in a period of 2 weeks, we got 9 people hired. So the plan is, hiring is still occurring. It is slower, and it's much more selective. In a great economy, you can kind of, be a little scary, and they'll still hire you on an interview. Well, Adam, we'll figure it out. We'll teach them. In today's world, where, the economy is kind of rough, we've got hyperinflation going on. Interest rates can't come down because the hyperinflation, they may even need to go up, which is pretty scary. Who knows what that'll do to the real estate market. But, we're in that sort of position that companies are selectively hiring. So here's the good news, 2N Hughes. Not only can you still get hired now, but when you work in one of these companies and they get rid of the bottom 10%, that creates incredible opportunities to move up and get promotions. And as long as you stay in that top 80 to 90%, it never is going to affect you anywhere. I worked, in the last 25 years, I had survived almost 30 layoffs at the companies that I worked for. But, I always made a point of trying to focus and be in the top 10%. So I never worried about it at all. It was each time there was a layoff, I actually got a promotion out of it. So that's what we're saying. We're also seeing a huge demand in cloud architects. We're seeing a huge demand in security architects. And we're seeing a ginormous demand in AI architects. And I expect a lot of AI hiring. First, it'll start out as semi-undisciplined hiring for some of the more medium positions. And then it's going to get very disciplined, looking for the best of the world. So great opportunities, 2N Hughes.
And I would also add to that, there's a lot of complexities when it comes to hiring, because it has to do with the overall market, what people are pushing. Mike mentioned the Jack Welch strategy that people have employed to drive up the bottom line. And have made it sound like it's great because it bolsters the business in other ways. But when Mike and we've had the discussion, we've had them with aviators and so forth as well, is the problem that we're really seeing, or the trend, is a talent gap, really. That's
huge.
what's happening. The implementation or adoption of technology has sped up because it's taken on a different type of life cycle. It used to be a lot driven around hardware, which allowed a lot of people the time to gain skills and become competent at them. But with the shift to cloud, and it's been driving over the past few years, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down very much. We've noticed that people have moved towards more of like a development or DevOps kind of cycle, where it's maybe every 6, 7, 8 weeks, something new happens, a new feature comes out. And that's very difficult for people to keep up with. So finding competent people for those roles, I would say, probably is one of the biggest issues right now that we're seeing in the job market. And the next, of course, is if you have inflated descriptions of the job, that makes it even more difficult. We see them too. Architect job, they want you to know Terraform. Terraform architects have nothing in common.
Yeah.
So
and they don't really want you to know Terraform.
Yeah.
It's part of the bogus job descriptions. They cover every skill from everybody else's job.
Yeah. So let's say you even have a legitimate job description, which I don't know if I've ever read a legitimate job description.
Not many.
Probably not, right? So it's a talent gap. Trying to find people that are competent at the job and being able to offer them something good. That's mostly what I have seen. So hopefully over time, as these things calm down, as we get away from certain hypes of it, I know Gen AI is here right now, so that's kind of like at the peak of its hype cycle right now. Hopefully it goes down within the next few years. We can get people trained properly back in the marketplace. And I'm generally talking about the people that we're going to need to implement these technologies. The architecture role, the business roles, those are actually increasing, interestingly. They're not decreasing, they're increasing. But it's that worry at the engineering level or at that solution engineer level that we're seeing very much in the market. And that sort of impacts us as architects as well, because if we're not touching the tech, we need somebody to touch the tech. And if we have a lackluster talent pool, it makes our job harder and doesn't allow us really to design and eventually put together a plan to build a solution that's going to propel our customers forward.
That's always the challenge. From an architecture perspective, we have to check our customers' readiness. And if they don't have the sophistication to implement it, then we can't actually go with that design. So, but in the end, there's that. So let's go to the next one. And please ask your questions. We want to help.
From TestSoc, does cloud security architect needs to do MBA since it's on the technical side? If yes, how does doing an MBA help a cloud security architect?
Well, TestSoc, let's be real. All architecture positions are executive positions. They're not very technical. Now, the security architect is more technical than the cloud architect, but it's not going to be a technical position. And that's where people go wrong. Of all the people I've gotten hired, I teach them so much tech. And then they say, Mike, where's the tech in my job? I go to meetings, I write statements of work, I facilitate meetings, I ask questions, I give presentations, I respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. Where's the tech? So let's be fair. So let's think about that. So TestSoc, I'm going to give you some secrets. The closer you are to the tech, the less you're going to earn. What? The closer you are to the tech, the more you're seen as a technician, the less you will be paid. Kind of like the construction worker that builds a house. Nobody pays a construction worker a lot. But that's designer who designed the Burj Al Arab in Dubai. That's someone, the architect that designed it's getting paid a lot. So keep that in the back of your mind. The better you're, now I'll also tell you that if you can go to salary.com, not that it's the best place, but it's in line with what we've seen for other technology professionals. The average person with strong business acumen skills earns $558,000 a year. To put that into comparison with the tech side. So if you are a security architect and you have an MBA, you're going to be seen as a peer executive to the people you're actually consulting to, which is the C-suite. We architects don't work for the techies. We work for the C-suite about optimizing the business. So the better your business acumen is, the better your leadership skills are, the better your executive presence, the better your communication skills. Now that's where you're going to start earning more. So it's going to open up a new world of principal architect kind of roles for you. It's going to open up a new world of leadership roles and other things. And I'll give you an example. I'll pull up a couple of salaries to show you of principal architect roles. And I was a principal architect in 2 years. It was no big deal. I went to business school. I understood how to get there. I had some expert guidance on so I'll pick two since I don't know. So since I'm here, and I'll give you I'll give you two different things. I'll start with a principal architect at Google, which will be this one, and you can see Tyrone if you want to share that. You can see a principal architect at Google. It's straight off of Glassdoor. That average pay is $508,000 a year. And the closer you are and the more you know about business, the faster you're going to get there. Now, if you also notice that pay range is $394 to $677, which is about $275,000 of difference between the top and bottom paid person on the team, you're seeing there's a lot of flexibility. And where's that flexibility going to get you? It's going to come from the people that have the business acumen, the interview skills, and the sales skills. And why do I say sales skills? Because our job is to design, present, and sell a solution. And accordingly, the better your business skills are, the better you'll be able to do at it, because you'll be able to build a better business case. Now, Google pays a little more than the average. Microsoft pays, more in line with normal. But even still, with the principal architect, Tyrone, if you can share that, you can still see that average salary is $379 with that pay range of $300 to $495. That's $200,000. That's a lot of difference between the top and the bottom paid person on the team. So, I want you to go out there and get it. And the better your business acumen, the better your executive presence, the greater your emotional intelligence, the greater your sales skills, the greater your leadership skills are, the better that you have, that's what's going to get you paid. So, yes, I recommend an MBA. Now, look, I've gotten people like Daniel Bosu hired, and he didn't even graduate high school. And I'm totally fine with that. And you can get there too. I've gotten plenty of people like Delroy Batt without degrees hired as their first tech job as solutions architect. Noah Parker, I think his degree was in social work. We got him hired as a solution architect. Pierre Dassault didn't go to college. He was working on sailboats before we trained him. Got him his job as a solutions architect. So the key is, it's not necessary to have the degree, but it's necessary to have the acumen. Same thing that I would say, look, it's not necessary to have a certification. You need to have the knowledge to do the job. You can get hired with no certifications. I've seen it plenty, but you can't get hired with certifications and no knowledge. So that's really what we're trying to talk about. You need to have the business acumen of an MBA. You really should. And the greater your business acumen, the more you'll earn. But this is not a tech job. People are confusing this with engineering. I was speaking to another architect that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Tremendous amount of respect. He's been an architect for about 35 years. I've only been an architect for 25 years. And he said, it's so hard hiring an architect. He says, I interview someone and they want to tell me the difference between a Microsoft API and an Amazon API. And he said, as soon as I hear that, I can't hire them because I know they're focused on an API as a focus to the digital transformation of my client. So you've got to have a lot of business acumen. Whether you get an MBA or not, it's up to you. I will tell you the MBA added 6 figures to my salary pretty much overnight. So I think it was great, but that's what I would do if I was going to get a degree. I would learn how to be an architect like I did, then have your company pay for your MBA like I did, and then after that, get what goes along with it.
I want to tell you guys a little bit about my journey and how I eventually found Mike and how Mike and I connected. So I wasn't looking for tech training. I wasn't looking for that. I was looking to up my game when it came to the business acumen, being better, more proficient. Because the way I always looked at it, if I'm going after a job, or I want to be, what type of person do I want to be in that job? That's probably a better question. And generally speaking, I tell myself, I want to be the best that I can. Basically, I want to be able to utilize my full potential. So the question is, how do you do that if you feel solid on the technical side? It's going to be the business side and what entails with it. So I started thinking to myself, okay, so what do I need to do? Do I need to go get an MBA? Well, who's paying for it? In this case, I'd be paying for it. My employer at that time doesn't see the value in an MBA, especially if they don't have, paying six figures for it. So what's the alternative? Read 100, 150 books? How do I know which book is good, which book is bad? Based on an Amazon review? Well, that doesn't seem to be very logical. So you get what? You get tailored training. You find somebody who has done it, who's got the training, who's got the experts. And that's eventually how I ended up with Mike. And Mike and I, we had that conversation. He goes like, why would I waste years of my time, hundreds of thousands of dollars doing an MBA when you went through it, you invested your time and your money, you got the experts behind the scenes who also have MBAs who've gone through it, that can give me a shortcut in a sense of being focused on what I need to learn from an MBA. Because let's be realistic, and this is about a lot of these programs, especially if they're based on a curriculum, especially like a hard set curriculum, there's going to be a lot of fluff to it. A lot of fluff you might never ever use in your actual career. So if you can cut that fluff out and focus maybe on the 20, 30% that's really, really, really going to make that difference for you, why wouldn't you do that? That's what I would say. So this is not my sales pitch saying you got to join the program, but I want you to think of it, be pragmatic about your research, see what's out there, find out what will and will not work with time frame. Now, like Mike said, do you need an MBA? No, you don't need anything if you don't want it. You don't have to do it. But what type of architect do you want to be? Do you want to be average or do you want to be great? And whatever the answer to that question is, you will know what you need to do next.
And Tess, to be fair, we teach a lot of these in our program.
Mm-hmm.
We also have an elite architect program. And what did we really do there? So, I did basically 2 MBAs. I know that's crazy. I did 90% of one, and then got an offer that I couldn't refuse, and I had to move. So I couldn't finish it because they didn't allow remote school back in 1999. That's neither here nor there. And then what ultimately happened, it was like mid-2000, so like 2005. And I was like, I really wish I'd finished that MBA. So I went and did a completely different one in another school because I loved it. And when I got done school, there was about $100,000 of training that Cisco sent me to: leadership, sales, executive presence, emotional intelligence, that kind of thing. So we actually created a elite version of our program. And what did we do there? We took all the elements of an MBA program, and we actually hired professors from an MBA program to teach some of the components. In addition to that, we had 3 MBAs on our team create content for the program. So now that's 5 people with master's degrees or above in business. In addition to that, we added all those leadership and sales and executive presence things that aren't covered in an MBA program. And then we paired that up with special interview and negotiation training, which again is not part of an MBA, but you should do. So that level of MBA level or greater is near and dear to my heart. And honestly, you need MBA level knowledge just to be able to do the job. But, we're about optimizing architecture careers, eking out that last $100,000 or $200,000 out of someone's salary, and business acumen is the way to go. Nobody's going to respect you for having 15 certifications, but they'll respect you for having the business acumen. At least not in the architecture world. In the engineering world, they might, but in the architecture world, it's not about your certifications. It's about your ability to transform your client's business.
Yeah, people want to see results. Many times the details of how you get it done, regardless if it's being an architect, an engineer, a system designer, whatever it may be, it goes over people's heads. They got their own jobs to do. They got their own expertise. They want to see the results. And that's how they're going to gauge your competency on. And if an MBA can make you great, then decide. You want to spend the time doing an MBA program, or you want to get something more tailored. I'm only one person. He said he had 4 or 5. I can always learn from 4 or 5 more people, regardless how good you think you are or how good I thought I am. I'm still learning up to this day. Mike and I, we have many conversations, even when it comes to tech, where we get a little geeky, and we still learn from one another.
Yep.
So just keep in mind, do you need it? No. Should you? Probably. All right, great question. All right, this is from Fola Shaki. Why aren't technical professionals afforded the same career prospects and respect as their business counterparts?
Falashaki, this is something hard, but I want you to think about it. Who gets paid more? The nurse that takes care of the patient in the hospital for 24 hours a day, or for the physician who stops by in 5 minutes and writes the plan? It's the physician because they created the plan, not the person that did the hard work. Who earns more? The person that designed the hotel or the average construction worker that builds the hotel? The person that designed the hotel probably earns 15 to 50 times more than the people that build the hotel. So we always prioritize and pay our system designers far more than the people that actually do the building. But what is it really? You know, I would argue that if we had engineers, and I've trained engineers that are in this $250,000 jobs or better, and we gave those engineers expert communication skills, good leadership skills, good sales skills, good executive presence, and good CXO relevancy, how to relate to the C-suite, now we've created what companies hire as a distinguished engineer, which is again a $250,000 to $500,000 job, because what are they really doing? They're no longer sitting behind the keyboard doing something on a one-on-one basis. Now they're out there talking to the big bank about how to optimize that big bank so that big bank can earn an additional $3 billion that year. Now, when you create $3 billion of value as an architect, you can be paid $1 million like it's nothing. So it's actually the impact you make. You know, Falashaki, I'm going to give you the advice that someone told me 20 years ago. And it honestly changed my career, it changed my salary, and it changed my life. 20 years ago, I had fallen asleep, and honestly, it's a great certification, one of my favorites. I had fallen asleep in a CISSP boot camp. It was in New York City when I worked for Cisco. Great content in the CISSP boot camp. CISSP is a great certification. But anyway, I fell asleep because I probably worked out too hard that morning before I went to the office. I've been known to do these things. I fall asleep, and all of a sudden I feel this tap on my shoulder, and my manager drags me to his office. And my manager says, Mike, he says, you're in the CISSP boot camp. You got a CCIE. You got all those other CCDP, CCNA stuff. And he says, Mike, stop focusing on certifications. He said, Mike, he said, your certifications are your how-to skills. He said, Mike, would you like to go from that $150,000 sales engineer that you are, or that junior level solutions architect, like the technical architect, to be a $300,000 or greater enterprise architect? Yeah, I want this. I was a kid. I don't think I was even 30 years old at the time. I'm like, give it to me. Tell me, I'm going to do this. And he said, Mike, he said, the impact that you can make on your clients is what's going to determine your salary. He said, right now you go to a router, you type config t router BGP something, and you bring in some routes. He said, what was your impact on the router and on the network? He said, imagine if you could help the bank that you're consulting to earn a few extra $1 billion this year. He said, that's impact. He said, so stop wasting your time on certifications. Stop trying to learn technical things. He says, you're so technical, it's hurting you right now. He said, focus on digital transformation. He said, want to go back to business school? Yeah, I'll pay for it. I want you to go to leadership training and sales training and executive presence training and emotional intelligence training. He did. My salary doubled in about 18 months. So the key is, are you making an impact on one, or are you making an impact on others? But remember, and this is sad, the people that do the work always get paid more. The pilot flies the airplane, not the most hard job in the world. The flight attendants hand out food and make sure you're stuck in your seats. That's a tough job. But the pilot gets paid more than the people that are handing out the drinks. That building architect gets paid more. The doctor who's not doing the heavy lifting and moving like the nurse does gets paid more. The planner, the thinker, always gets paid more than the doer. So the hands-on techies are doers. And sadly, they're seen as the construction workers in technology. Now, I have tremendous respect for engineers. My buddy Ted, he can build anything with his hands. I'm amazed by it. Honestly, I call him 3 times a week and have him come over and build stuff in my house, to be fair to that. But, you know, the key is, I can't build it because I'm an architect and it's not what I do. So I hope that answers your questions. The planners, the thinkers, always earn more than the actual doers.
And I would say it depends what you mean with prospects. I'll give you this example. If we're going to look at engineers, because that's what most people generally get into before they become architects. We're trying to reverse that trend a little bit, but it depends who you work for. If you work for let's say just a general enterprise, the things that you can be exposed to most likely are going to be very limited, because when it comes to technology, think about this again. Why does a business use technology? It is to propel whatever they're doing forward, right? So technology isn't for them to geek out about, to get excited about. It's a means to an end.
Exactly.
It's just like your car. Most of the times we all just get in our car so we can get to work. We don't get in a car to joyride anymore. We did this when we were 15, 16. Then it was fun. Or if we ever have the opportunity to get maybe in a car that we thoroughly enjoy, or we go to a place that we enjoy, right? That's where we get excited. We geek out about these opportunities. But for a business itself, it's just a means to an end. So if you work for such a company, their adoption of technology is going to be to a certain extent limited, especially the variety of technology. So that's an enterprise. But what if you work for a service provider? Let's say somebody like a British Telecom, a Verizon, an AT&T. What about Italia, right? You can have them, or Tegla, Cognate. What if you're working for a managed service provider? They're catering to all types of enterprise cases and Fortune 500 companies, what they need. So your actual ability to move up and your prospect of career advancements are going to be drastically different at that type of company compared to an enterprise. So I wouldn't necessarily say that, I guess, technical professionals aren't afforded prospects, but it does depend on where you are. If we say the earning potential, it's a no bout. If you're at the business, if you're at the forefront, if you can generate income for the company, they're always going to pay you more. That makes sense. Because generally speaking, tech, since it's a mean to an end, and then people that operate and maintain it, you're viewed as a liability to them. You're not an asset because you cost them money. It's unfortunate because they can't do without you.
Yes.
But they want to do without you. So that's kind of the conundrum there. So from earning potential, you will earn less no matter how great you are in tech. You can have 8 CCIEs, it will make a difference because you are still just viewed as a hands-on doer, which is unfortunate because you're probably going to be the smartest guy in the entire organization or gal. Now, when it comes to respect, this is my opinion only, okay? I have no data, I have no scientific studies, nothing. But I feel like almost it's human nature. We tend to let certain things get to our head, make ourselves feel more important than we should be. And we all might have seen that, somebody's boss doesn't treat the other one with respect, treats them more lowly because they think they're more important because they're high up on the chain. But that's not really how you should treat people, right? Those are made up positions, made up hierarchy in life. If I see you in a store, it doesn't matter if you're a boss or a CEO, what's the difference? You're still a human being, right? So that hierarchy does make a lot of sense. So I think a lot has to do with human nature. Personally, I don't care if you're the CEO. I don't care if you're the janitor. I don't care if you're the maid. I don't care if you're the engineer. We're all part of a team, regardless of our hierarchy, all of us. And the business runs because we're all there. We all have our parts to play. And everybody is a human being. We all bleed red at the end of the day. Yep. Everybody should be treated with the same respect and same courtesy. So that's just my opinion. So I think it's human nature. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Good question, though. I like that one.
Good question.
All right, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Kojo. It says, why are there a lot of job description postings requiring programming experience for cloud architects?
Kojo, let me take that one. So first, I did a video on our YouTube channel with Christina Marino. She's the CEO of a national recruiting firm in New York. And she talks about why employers put a catch-all where they list job skills from 500 people's different careers to try and get people to apply. I'll also tell you, Kojo, that I've never seen a job description in tech that was real. Now, Kojo, I'm also going to tell you this. I've never been on an interview where I didn't get a job. And in 40% of the cases, because I've accepted jobs from 5 companies, I've gotten a lot more than 5 offers. But of the 5 companies I've accepted offers from, 2 of them gave me a better job than the one I applied for. And I've never had more than 10% of the things. So here's ultimately what happens, Kojo. I want to create a job for a cloud architect. So what do I do? And we'll talk about the Amazon difference in a second. So when I hire a job for a cloud architect, I'm a hiring manager. I don't know anything about writing job descriptions. I have none. I'm also working, 10 hours a day, because when you're a manager, you typically have to work more than when you were when you were an individual contributor. So what do? I go to ZipRecruiter, Dice, Indeed, and I look up cloud architect. And there's this thing that's like 3 pages long. Oh, this is good. It's remarkably comprehensive. I cut and paste it into Microsoft Word. And then I look and see that it doesn't have any of the skills that I need, and I throw them in there. I save it, and then I send it to HR. And now I've got literally this beautiful 14-page job description that needs 3 Olympic gold medals, expertise being a physician, attorney, an airplane pilot, an NBA player, and an NFL player, and everybody's job that's there. So honestly, they're trying to cast a wide range to get people to apply so they can look for it. But now AWS is the exact opposite. In the rest of the world outside of AWS, the cloud architect is actually a higher position than the solution architect, because the cloud architect would be designing hybrid clouds, hybrid multi-clouds, whereas solution architect typically works with one. Now at AWS, they hire a cloud architect, which isn't an architect at all. It's more of a engineer/technical architect, and they call it a cloud architect. But if you're a cloud architect at Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, Accenture, Microsoft, you're going to be doing pure cloud architect work. But they made up the term cloud architect for more of a techie architect, more of a technical architect than their solutions architect. But outside of that, the cloud architect's a bigger, higher paying position. But, they're always going to look there, and everybody's got a bias when they hire people. People that come from a software development background have a bias that they like people to know coding. People that have an infrastructure background want people to have an infrastructure background. My wife said this to me when I was younger. Now, my wife is super smart. She's a genius. Her IQ is 168, actually. So smarter than pretty much anybody, but like 1/10 of 1%. And she said, Mike, if you go to the hairdresser, they're going to tell you need a haircut. She said, if you go to the car dealer, they're going to tell you need a new car. They're like, Mike, if you go to the cardiologist, you're going to need a stress test to make sure your heart's healthy. People always look at that. So that's why you see it for some. Lots of people came from the application world in their youth. It's what they know, and they see it. But most of it's just writing catch-all ridiculous job descriptions. I can tell you I've been an architect for 25 years. I have no idea how to code. I can tell you if I ask most of the architects I know, they have no idea how to code either. But they all know lots of designs, presentations, and sales. Kojo, it's kind of scary. I guess it was about 3 years ago we started doing it, or 4 years ago. That was about 4 years ago my buddies and I started doing it. We actually started looking at cloud architect job descriptions, because when people were trying to hire them and they didn't even know what it was. And my buddies and I, we all made an agreement. We all spent way too much money on a bottle of Macallan 25. And we would get on WebEx, and we would have this really cool high definition video conference. And we'd all drink, and we'd go through these job descriptions. Hey, you've been an architect now for 15 years. Have you ever done any of this? And they'd say no. And they'd say, Mike, you've been an architect for 20 years. Have you done any of these things? And I'd say no. No, I've just never seen a real job description in 25 years of tech.
I will give you experience somewhere else I've been before. Generally speaking, people get excited when they see new hiring happening at a company. And some companies even have the requirement to send out the actual job description internally first to allow internal hiring compared to external. And there was an instance one time, and it wasn't just me, there was a few people, we read the job description. And as we were reading it, we were wondering, is this even for the right company? Is this even for the company we're working for? Because they were requesting to have experience with MPLS. We don't have an MPLS backbone. We don't run it. We don't manage it. All we did is resold that particular WAN connectivity option to the customers. That's it. So I remember it was a few of us, we went to the manager and we said, hey, listen, is this a new product rollout that we're not aware of? Do we need to kind of like shore up our knowledge about this, or what are we doing? Are we doing VPN services over MPLS? What are we doing? And they just told us, hey, no, we're just, because we resell this type of service, we want people to be familiar with it. It says like, yeah, but you can't write. You need experience with MPLS. If you're just reselling it, is the person troubleshooting any trouble? No. Are they doing the turn up on it? No. Okay, so what is that person predominantly going to be doing? Oh, they're probably just going to have to make sure the edge device is up and running, and depending on what it is, are they connecting via routing protocol, or are they doing like a layer 2 tunnel? That's it, like a VLAN tag. That's it. And I said, and for that, you're putting it on the job description to ask for experience. Says, are you people nuts? Says, you're never ever going to get anyone for all of this. So sometimes it could be just as simple as somebody mentioned they have something, and they'll slap it onto the job description. Probably in this case, you'll see many times somebody say like, oh, we have some Python running in the background, or some C. Well, put that on the job application because they'll need to know about that. And then they get to the job, and guess what? They never ever touch it. They might hear it in passing, but they won't ever do it. But it was put on there, and it's actually detrimental in finding people. Or like Mike said, some people, they know about how bad the talent gap is, so they'll just throw anything and everything, and they hope that somebody's going to be gutsy enough to apply to it. And, they hope they have 2 out of the 50,000 skill sets that they were just asking for. So it could be a little bit different scenarios, but that's a personal experience I had where literally it got listed on it just because somebody saw it written, we heard, we had it, but there was actually nothing required from that person when it came to that technology.
Yeah.
Mike is laughing. I know he's seen that also in his situation.
Every day, yeah.
All right, question from Rono. I'm interested in cloud engineering. What is it that I really need to learn? I am already familiar with things like networking, Linux, and coding. Any recommendations for becoming a cloud engineer?
Well, Rono, in general, I would recommend an architecture career over an engineering career. Just think about this, because AI can do a lot of what cloud engineers can do, and it can't do anything that an architect would. So if you go to cloud engineering because you love engineering, that's totally fine. But I want you to do what we're going to tell you, because I want to make sure you're the superstar engineer that will never get replaced by technology. So first thing, let's talk about the technical skills. You really need to understand the network and the data center. And I don't mean how to configure the network. I mean, you need to understand the network. You said you're familiar. So I need you to be familiar with BGP. What happens, through the BGP state, whether it's an open or active or open sent or established or connect, understand those finite state machines. Understand, that IP addressing component of it. Understand the wide area network components of the network. Then I need you to understand Linux administration for a cloud engineer. Remember, architects don't do any of this, but engineers do. So I need you to be able to understand how to create a virtual machine, how to install things. In Linux, where are all those things? That's /etc stuff, what's going on in there. Getting used to being able to modify scripts, bash shell scripts in Linux, for example. Either using VI or Vim or sudo or nano and editing those key configuration files, because you're going to be doing stuff in Linux all the time. Linux scripting is going to be obvious, typically bash shell scripting. You're also going to need Windows, and you're going to have to understand Active Directory and setting up Active Directory and these trusts and these forests and all this other stuff that goes along with that, and all those Microsoft workloads and quotas and all that other stuff. So you're going to need some good knowledge of Windows, which means you're also going to need good knowledge as a cloud engineer of, writing, PowerShell scripts, because you're going to be doing that. Now, you're going to be dealing with a lot of infrastructure as code, and that means Terraform. And Terraform is going to be is big, and IBM just announced its intention to buy Terraform. And that now puts IBM in a leadership position in cloud computing, because IBM owns the OpenStack cloud through the Red Hat acquisition, and IBM now owns Terraform. IBM is big in mainframes, and the world's adding more mainframes right now. And IBM has their cloud solutions. Now, along with that, you need to know Kubernetes. So what kind of Kubernetes are we really going to be using in the cloud? IBM OpenShift, because 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. And if we need to make multi-cloud work, we're not going to use an Elastic Kubernetes service or an Azure Kubernetes service or Google Kubernetes service. we're going to need our own platform that we maintain that's semi-managed across clouds. And that brings IBM OpenStack in there. So you're going to need to understand some Kubernetes. Now, if you want to be a cloud engineer, obviously you're going to need to write Python code, which are going to be there. And as a cloud engineer, you're going to need to be familiar with DevOps tools, whether it be Jenkins and Spinnaker and Git and GitHub and GitLab and all that other engineering stuff that those engineers play with. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Now, that will get you hired. Now, when the layoffs come for the cloud engineers, because AI is going to do some of this work, and the outsourcing gets done, because it doesn't matter if my cloud engineer is in California, Canada, Cambodia, the Cayman Islands, Cameroon, or Cape Town. But what does matter is 100,000 US equivalent is the equivalent to $28,000 in India. So when and especially with Americans not going to the office and refusing to work, those engineering positions, I expect a lot of them to be outsourced. Lots of highly educated people in, say, Nigeria, good, strong education, South Africa, India, Pakistan, Philippines. So I see most of those cloud engineering jobs getting shipped overseas that aren't being done with AI. So how do you not become a victim of your job being overseas and watching your salary go down? You focus on your business acumen, your leadership skills, your presentation skills, your sales skills, because you can't get rid of a sales engineer. Somebody needs to go sell that stuff. And in a good economy and a bad economy, companies always need revenue. So I love engineers. I have deep respect for engineers, but that's how you protect yourself. You become great and you develop the human side of the skills, not just the tech skills, and you'll do wonderful, Rono.
How to answer this one? Don't. I suppose would be a good answer. Don't. But, joking aside, it depends on who you want to work for as an engineer. And the reason I say that is if you go work for somebody else, you will have to learn the ins and outs of whatever it is that is part of the infrastructure and how that is supposed to work. And that's going to vary a little bit among different cloud service providers. So you can't be a general cloud engineer when it comes to that. That's going to be a little bit difficult. So you're going to have to find something that, and again, if you can find something you enjoy, that's always best. Or if you're just naturally good at something, you pick it up quickly, focus on that, become really good at it, and be an engineer in that sense. If it's storage, if you're really good at storage, work on being great at storage and databases. They go together. If you're really good at networking, pick networking and maybe storage, or networking and security, right? Because you're going to need that as an engineer. Aside from that, I know we always preach this when it comes to the architect side, but even as an engineer, I can't overstate this. Get the actual interpersonal skills up. Get your communications up, your writing skills, your business acumen, get that up, because that's what's going to set you apart, even as an engineer. So you can start moving into these roles where you're overseeing the projects, leading the projects. You could even move into positions where you're going to be the actual manager of a particular group. Think of it like a director of technology or something like that. That's where I would focus on when it comes to engineering, is just enough of something specialty and then moving up the rest of my business skills. And I think that way, if you think of it from a strategic perspective, you're leaving yourself open to a lot more opportunities, right? You're not kind of like pigeonholing yourself just when it comes to the technical side. So that would be something that I would recommend to look into it. But aside from that, I give you a lot of credit. Engineering is not easy. Mike listed off a laundry list of things that you potentially should learn. So, if you have any other questions, let us know. We'll be glad to answer them for you. And even though we mostly talk architecture, engineering is fun from time to time to talk about as well.
Yeah.
All right. Question from LN. How many years do you think is required for a cloud fresher to qualify to be an architect if they, number one, worked in a small team doing a lot of learning, and deploying, number two, a big team with okay-ish progress?
Okay, Alan, I'm going to actually ask you a different question, and I'm going to really answer it. How many years do you think you can work as a flight attendant before someone hires you as an airplane pilot? How many years do you think you can work as a nurse before somebody hires you as a doctor? You're asking me if I get hands-on experience doing construction, how is that going to translate into getting your job? Now, I'll give you other freshers an example. Ivan Tambo was a 24-year-old fresher working as a waiter. We trained him, and his first job was a solution architect at AWS. Coyote was a college student. First job was a solution architect at AWS. Jordan Kittil, wow, you should have seen this fireball speak at our Go Cloud Careers Conference. He was like 24, best friends with Ivan Tambo, just got our first job was with the AWS. So, that's an example of people that were there. Pierre Dassault was a college kid, got his first job as a solution architect. Delroy Batt, first job as a solution architect. So there's that. Now, they trained to be architects, and that's why it's their first job. Now, let's say they trained to be hands-on engineers. Guess what? I've got Harsha, who was a cloud engineer for more than 10 years, and we trained him to be a cloud architect. I've got someone yesterday that was in my architecture class, and I asked him how many years he's been an engineer after his presentation, because his presentation felt like an engineering presentation, and I said, you're going to have to unlearn. So the reality is you may be able to work as an engineer, and 10 years later, hopefully, possibly think you might learn architecture. Or the reality is you might work as a cloud engineer and then want to be an architect and need to take architect training because it's a different job. But the reality is you, generally speaking, don't learn how to be an airplane pilot by working in the mailroom. And an architect's job isn't a job, that you're going to be good at if you've not learned how to do it. So, whatever you do, if you want to learn engineering, go learn engineering and go do your hands-on stuff, but go get an MBA. So you have the business acumen that's going to get you halfway there. And then get out of the engineering world and then hire somebody to teach you how to design your systems. But the sad reality is I don't really think learning somebody else's job is a good way to learn the job you want. It's just not. You'll learn somebody else's job. Hopefully you'll get good at it and be great at it. But teaching you how to be an architect from learning how to do construction, just not going to be there. And that's why nobody hires the construction workers that build the buildings to go design the building, because engineering knowledge or building doesn't teach you system design. So if you're going to go do that, make sure you get architecture training until you want to get there. But I know lots of people, Noah Parker, college kid, social worker, first job as an architect, Jennifer Ema, mental health tech, first job as a solution architect after we trained her. So the cloud architect or the solution architect could be your first job as soon as you train for it. But learning somebody else's job, I don't know if it's ever going to get you there. And I've got people with 20 years experience, 15-year cloud engineer, 5 years as developers before them, and we still have to retrain them. And I'm not going to tell you they get through the program any faster. And Mark had a lot of engineering background, and he had to unlearn how to be an engineer to be an architect. Mark's a rock star. I spent 6 months as an engineer, thankfully no more than that before I moved into my architecture job, because those other engineers that became architects really struggled. They were focusing on the tech, which is what engineers focus on, which is important for engineers. And we architects were focused on the business. So engineering is teaching you how to do somebody else's job, not this job. I hope that answered and made sense to you.
Fantastic. Let's move on to the next question. I'm just going to say it's from me. Will AI replace network engineering?
Some of it, yes. So let's talk about the network engineering that it will replace. Those network admins that go config T in gigabit Ethernet 0/0 IP ADDR 192.168.1.1 255.255.252 no shut router OSPF1 and put a statement in. Those people, honestly, AI can get rid of them. But let's talk about the levels of network engineering that we're talking about. Any of the hands-on work, that stuff's outsourced. That's no big deal. AI can do it. But here's what AI can't do. AI cannot figure out how to perform, well, actually, to some degrees it can. But AI is not going to be the best at dealing with an enterprise that has 5,000 remote locations and having the architect design a routing strategy and getting the super smarts from the super smart engineers that are going to get to the nitty-gritty of these routing protocols that they need and be thinking about which timers you can tune, etc. So yes, I do think AI will replace the junior level engineering jobs in all careers. Bottom 30% of programmers, bottom 30% of cloud engineers, bottom 30% of network engineers. But the people that have like the CCIE level knowledge, and Mez, I consider the CCIE to be intro level when we're talking about network engineering. And I say this because I remember I took the CCIE within 6 months of the time I started networking. And I passed it. It was no big deal to pass it. It wasn't easy, but it was, it was doable. But it took me 25 years to really learn networking after the CCIE. But I'd say the CCIE level, not necessarily certified, but the people with that knowledge, they're going to be irreplaceable because you always need people that have good, strong competency to build the things that the architects design. But I do worry about the bottom 30%. So how do you survive in network engineering? If you're a network engineer, and I love network engineering, you'd be great. You pick something you focus on. For me, I spent 5 years consulting on IP multicast. And I spent about another 5 years consulting on BGP, world's largest internet service providers. That was a rare skill at that point. So just make yourself great. Really focus on being there. Build those interpersonal skills, those relationship skills, those leadership skills, those soft skills, that business acumen, and then you'll never be replaced. But don't allow yourself to be the bottom 30%.
Yep. So basically, not anytime soon, even for the bottom ones, but sooner or later, the basic provisioning tasks are going to be outsourced to AI. But somebody else is going to still have to understand the complexity of the systems, troubleshoot them, fix them, until AI gets to a point where it can be self-healing, which is going to be a while. And
I think those bottom 30% have 1 to 2 years until they're out, actually, sadly. Potentially, yeah. All right, great question. And next question follow-up from me. It says, I'm 3/4 of the way through the official certification guide for the CCNA, and I feel as though I may be retaining 15% of it. Any recommendation? Yeah, so here's how you go through a certification. What's in the certification isn't enough for anything. I'm going to tell you that right now. Even the CCIE, barely enough to get a job as a network engineer. But when you go through the CCNA, it is the most beautiful framework. And if you use the framework correctly, it will help you build a great career. So first you go through it. Now you're reading a chapter in the CCNA book about OSPF, for example. Now, when you get to that chapter about OSPF, I want you to go to the Internet Engineering Task Force page. I want you to read the RFC. And when you read a chapter about OSPF, I want you to do the following. So you're reading a chapter and they talk about an OSPF hello. No, what's what I want you to do? I want you to go look up what is an OSPF hello. And then when they talk about a designated router and a backup designated router, I want you to go out there and you seriously not only read the book, but go out there and look at the designated router and the backup designated router. And when they talk about the LSAs and OSPF, I need you to really think about what is that type 1 LSA that a router generates and why does it generate that? Why do we need the status of that router's links? And if we're on a broadcast multi-access network and there's a type 2 LSA, I need you to go figure out why. Think about it in the context. Type 3, say, go in between areas. Why are we summarizing in between areas? By summarizing as in between areas, what are we doing to the LSA database? Does it enable us to run less calculations, which enables OSPF to scale? Go learn about it. Now, when you start reading about a type 5 LSA, which is an external LSA, and type 4, which is how do you reach the router that has the type 5 LSA, learn it. Then once you learn it, I want you to write it down in notes. Then I want you to find someone that doesn't know tech at all. I use my wife. My wife knows internal medicine and cardiology. She's a genius, but she hates tech. So I then explain it to my wife. Why? If she can understand it, I understood it well enough to explain it to her. Because if you can't explain it simply, you simply don't know it well enough. And that's why if you take an AWS certification taught by one of the course providers that's never been an architect, and you know who they are, they're on Udemy, they're everywhere, what you hear is blah, 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 because they didn't understand it. And if you can explain the tech to a non-technical person, it'll be there. And then, if you want to be an engineer, go and build it after you understand it. And when you set up the router 1 and the router 2 and you turn on OSPF, debug the IP OSPF packets. Watch it go from init to xart to exchange to loading to full. And then go back to the book and look at it. And that's how you get through these networking trainings and get it. Look, thankfully, cloud computing isn't anywhere near as complicated as this networking stuff, because my students would be terrified if it was all just networking, like for network architects and deep network engineering. But, that's the thing. you're going to do it, Mez. And it is a great career. It is absolutely fantastic. And that's how you get through and you actually learn. So if you could read the 2,000 pages in 4 days, let's assume you had that reading skill, because that's how I did it, because I'd come from medicine. It was easy. I'd like you to spend the next 45 days, assuming it takes you 4 days to read the book, to actually focus on all that other stuff. And then when you're done that certification, you used it as a framework and you've got good knowledge and marketable skills. And you'll pass interviews too.
I think we're going to need another session to discuss this one. So I'll leave this question be. We'll circle back eventually, have maybe a, heads in a cloud or something like that about how to actually study for some of this stuff. So, but what Mike said, the research aspect is probably one of the most crucial phases that you can have. Research, build context around what you're learning. Because if you're not understanding something, generally speaking, it has to do with you not understanding the connections of the different information. So build context so that you can connect the information and have it make sense to you. That would be my 15 seconds advice. Great question. I like that one.
Me too.
Question from Igor. Hi, what formal education do you recommend as an addition to your program? I'm thinking about IT or business.
Igor, I recommend business degrees. I absolutely get sad when I see someone takes an IT degree, like a computer science degree. And here's the reason I get sad. The professors that are teaching these things probably are 10 to 15 years out of date. And they teach all these things like coding. And why do I hate that? Because I'm an economist and I like to look at the supply and demand curve. And if everybody in the entire world is taught how to code, there's an enormous supply. And as AI can do more coding, the demand is going down. So I don't really look for that. What are the skills that you, Igor, and I know you're an architect, you're going well, that's going to help you? More soft skills, more business acumen, more leadership, more executive presence. So get that business degree. I know where you're learning your tech from. You're learning it from us, and you're doing really well. And actually, I saw a lot of growth in your presentation and sales skills at the last interview training session. I hope to see you tonight, Igor, as well. But that's what I would do. I'd get a business degree. I have got my degrees in healthcare, business, and all kinds of exciting things, but not tech. I would never go to school for a computer degree.
Easy answer, business. Very easy. Thanks for your question, Igor. From Fola Shaki, in your opinion, what does Azure do well versus AWS and Google Cloud?
Well, it's all based upon the business, and each use case is going to be different. But Azure, best artificial intelligence out there right now, and Microsoft has the most experience with helping clients improve their business performance through technology. So from a digital transformation, from a generative AI, wow, Microsoft's in the lead. Now, when you look at Google's got some serious expertise in algorithms, and they've also got some expertise in big data. So if we look at the big data expertise and the AI expertise that we see with Google, we see a lot of that. Now, when I look at AWS, here's what I see. Lots of infrastructure. They've got a giant cloud and they've got infrastructure absolutely everywhere. And they've got pretty much, if you need a platform, it's going to be around. But that's how I look at them. Azure, the real experts in digital transformation and AI. That's the lead over there by far, especially with the investments Microsoft made strategically with OpenAI initially. And then Google, big data, AI. And then AWS, they just got a lot of data centers out there. So they can cover you no matter where you're at in the world.
Okay. Good question. Next, it's from Up and Up. What is the type of cloud architect that is is the cloud architect that's most in demand? Based on your opinion?
They're all in demand, but I'll tell you, architects with good business acumen are the most in demand. I've had a lot of people come to me, and I didn't know. It was after I retired. And they're like, Mike, this executive said you were the best architect they've ever worked at. This executive said you were the best. What did you do? I said, the rest of them were focused on getting 18,000 tech certifications, and I went and focused on my business acumen. And they said, funny. They always talked about your ability to close deals. So I guess that makes sense. So those that have the most business skills.
Yeah, I would say leaders. Somebody like an enterprise architect, somebody that can rally the groups, find the right people, find the right specialized architects. Those are always going to be more in demand. It's a rare skill. It is needed. It puts you at the forefront when it comes to the C-suite, because they're going to trust a person like that. They can take command, make things happen. So I would say definitely the enterprise architect. That's going to be 80% business and 20% tech. Next, up and up, he also asks, I see you offer quite a few courses on your site. Can you explain what is the difference between the Cloud Architect Development Program versus the Elite Cloud Architect Program?
Absolutely, and it's a great question. So our Cloud Architect Career Development Program is the program that everybody knows us for. It's the program that got us the #1 in cloud computing and online training award that we received, and it's the one that's gotten people hired as cloud architects. Honestly, that program's all anybody needs to become a cloud architect. It's a great program, and I'm incredibly proud of it. But there are things that you can do to further advance your career. The more business acumen, the more leadership skills, the more sales skills, the more executive skills open you up to these, $500,000 principal architect roles that I showed you earlier in this video. So this course, the Elite program, includes the Cloud Architect Career Development Program, and it's got our tech leadership course, which is like our mini MBA and all the stuff that's not covered. The other components that are part of that Elite program is we add extra enterprise architecture training, because we want our best architects and our elite architects to understand more digital transformation. And we also have our tech interview mastery program, where we bring people in, we do some small private interview training, and then we do monthly interview training. And we created this course that, is a more comprehensive course to help people, get jobs that over the next 10 or 15 years may pay them a few $100,000 extra per year. So either one is great. It's just that the Elite Architect program is everything that I learned over 30 years and had to spend over $300,000 education to receive. That Cloud Architect program is going to get people really great cloud architect jobs. And it's the integral component, the main component of the Elite program. Let's go to the next one, Tyrone.
Next question by Mike Harden. What professional level certification do you recommend to pair with your Gen AI program to be taken seriously based on the current market? AWS Professional, Azure Expert, or TOGAF?
So Mike, let me answer this question. I've actually asked thousands of hiring managers over the years which certifications they care about, and except for the CCIE, they don't really care about certifications. Hiring managers care about your competency, your communication skills, your energy, your enthusiasm and passion for the work, your emotional intelligence, your being a great team player, and willing to go above and beyond. So that's what you need to be able to get hired. Now, David and Lithicum and I talked about it and said, what certifications should we include? David said, there are no AI certifications. And I said, there are no AI or architect certifications out there. I said, but if we wanted to give someone 2 or 3 certifications to make them stand out, what would it be? Well, TOGAF is really a process to drive digital transformation. So in our generative AI architect program, we provide TOGAF 10 training. We also provide training for the Azure Solutions Architect Expert and the AWS Solutions Architect Professional. So we would say, get one of those cloud certifications, either the AWS one or the Azure, it doesn't matter, and get the TOGAF. And we say that only to build your brand, because these interviews will help you, these certifications will help you get an interview, but they don't teach you the job, we'll teach you the job. So those are the certifications that I would recommend.
And I would suggest, Mike, if you can, join us for tomorrow for the webinar as well. You can ask David as well, see his direct response, and hopefully I will give you some additional clarity. From Up and Up, it says, in the case there is a disagreement on the project, who will have more authority, the project manager or the cloud architect?
Up and Up, a project manager has 0 authority on anything. A line manager definitely has authority. The cloud architect has authority. Here's what the project manager is responsible for: making sure that people do their things. So the project manager is the taskmaster. Mark, did you get your document into me? Mike, did you get your document into me? Billy Bob, did you get your document into me? Cindy the cat, did you get your document? Joey, did you do the install on this thing? That's all they do. Now, if there's a disagreement, that project manager will go to that person's manager, and that person's manager will discipline them. But a project manager has zero authority. Now, if it's the design of the project, the cloud architect is responsible for it. Once it goes into building, the cloud architect is often a new customer. A program manager, which is like a project manager but a slightly bigger role, may bring in some project managers. Unless they project manage themselves, will bring in the delivery people and the implementation people. But cloud architect is a much higher paying position than a project manager. It has much more respect and much more authority. Good question there, Up and Up.
And question by Simon, can you offer non-live versions of the enterprise and the AI architect programs for those temporarily unable to attend the live session?
You know, Simon, I'm thinking about it every day. I love the concept of creating a non-live program. I really do. I worry that, in a non-live program, when does that person present the architecture to a group of people and get the feedback? How do we guide people in business process reengineering in a non-live version? And I can tell you that me and Chris and Mark and Alonzo, our executive team, as well as some really good educators at some business schools that we know, we're constantly thinking out, how could we make it non-live? Because if we make it non-live, we want to make it great. But we're not sure about it yet. We're thinking about it. If we can find a way to make it a really good experience, we'll make it non-live, because I really would like to do that. That gives us more people in different time zones. It helps people in the developing world. So I'm strongly trying to consider it. But for people that can attend live, it's going to be a much better experience to design an architecture in front of an expert and get feedback, to be interviewed in front of an expert and get feedback, those kinds of things.
All right, fantastic. Mike, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I know you have a meeting that started about 4 minutes ago. If you don't mind, can you answer one more question from Rohan before we wrap up? All right, Tyrone, if you can put Rohan Anand's question up. It says, I am in pre-sales. I am in pre-sale infrastructure architect role. I hate the pressure and the strict timelines. How cloud architecture will be different from pre-sales architecture?
Well, Rohan, the majority of cloud architects work pre-sales, and it's going to be the same job you're doing right now. So if you don't like the job as an infrastructure pre-sales architect, you're not going to like the job as a solutions architect or a cloud architect. Now, there are other architects that work post-sales, like cloud architects that work post-sales, meaning they design, present, and sell it to the C-suite without sales. But I'm not sure they're going to be less pressure than what you're actually dealing with as an architect. I feel like the pre-sales roles are very low pressure compared to certain other roles that I've actually had over the years. But honestly, it's going to be the same thing. And if you're unhappy in a pre-sales environment, you're going to be doing a lot of designing, presenting, and selling. There's going to be deadlines. There's going to be business deals that you have to close. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
All right, sounds good.
Let me get to the one last question that came in on LinkedIn. I know I'm short of time. From Lashine Limbo.
All right. It says, hi, Mike. Whilst I was studying BSc in business management, some events led me to study cybersecurity. I did a 2-year course and some certifications. However, I am not successful to land a job. I would like to know your thought process on how you will. Is there more to the question?
I don't think so. So
okay,
let's do this. I want to invite you to one of our free webinars on like how to get your first cloud architect job. Now, tomorrow we're doing a generative AI webinar, but if you come to my webinar next week on how to get your first cloud architect job, we can talk to you about what you need to do to become a cloud security architect. And, really that's what we're talking about. Tyrone said the rest is in the chat box. I didn't see it. So if there's more.
Yeah, let me read it. It says, I would like to know your thought process on how you will move forward if you were me. Much appreciated.
So the first thing is we need to figure out what kind of security career you want. Do you want to be in offensive security, which is penetration testing, as an engineer? Do you want to be in defensive security as an architect where you design it? Or do you want to be in defensive security where you build it? Because if you don't do that or define that, you're really not learning any of the right skills for any job. Now, again, nobody cares about your certifications. I will tell you that I'm going to be doing a free CISSP bootcamp on this channel in a couple months, and that will give you some security knowledge. But we need to figure out what you want to do. Now, if you come to my free webinar, I can ask you what you've done. On that free webinar, I'll give you a mini interview. I'll see what your competency is, and then I can make recommendations. But I need to know your strengths. I need to know your weaknesses. I need to know your communication skills. I need to assess what your knowledge is. You know, what is your knowledge of security policy? What is your knowledge of how next generation firewalls work? Do you understand the algorithms? What is your knowledge on encryption? Encryption when, encryption storage? What is your knowledge in public key infrastructure? And without assessing your capabilities, I can't build you a plan. You know, I used to practice medicine in my youth, and then I became an architect, and it's the same job. It's about collecting all the information, and once you have the information, being able to build, make a real diagnosis, and get you there. And I really want to help you there, Limbu, and I'm happy to do it, and we can do it completely free on that webinar. So come to our cloud security, our cloud architect webinar. We train a tremendous number of cloud security architects in that program. I can assess you, and after I assess you, I can tell you what you need to do. And it'll be on Zoom, so I can give you a full assessment, and I'm happy to do it. It's free. Join our webinars. And I want to get you to your goals. But I can't make a recommendation without knowing what you're doing and knowing your starting point and actually knowing your exact goal. And we can help you there. But I can tell you, you're not going to get there from basic certifications. You're not going to get there playing with a try hack me kind of thing. You're going to have to go out there and really learn the job and the skills for the job, and we can easily get you. So I hope I answered your question there. I want to remind everybody that tomorrow we've got our generative AI webinar. It'll be me and David Lithicum. He used to be the chief of cloud strategy over there at Deloitte. Been in this field for decades in generative AI and cloud. I've got about 25 to 30 years experience in this architecture world as well. David and I love architecture careers, love talking about it. And it's free. It's on Zoom, so sign up. I also want to let you know we've got some free networking training. And for those of you that are new with networking or struggling with networking, come to this. You're going to learn a lot. It'll be taught by 3 Cisco certified internet experts and another network expert with a CCNP. Of course, we've got people past that AWS Advanced Networking, but that's no big deal, that are part of that faculty that's going to teach you that. The CCIE, the 50, 60 years of networking architect experience is really going to teach you, and it's going to be free. So go sign up for that, the subnetting and the BGP webinars. And take advantage of our 50% off of our generative AI lunch. I know what's going to happen. It's going to be the 1st of May. We're going to get about 150 emails that said we missed the sale. Can we have the sale price? And we just can't charge different prices to different people. So please take advantage of it now, because we want to get you to your goals. Take care, everyone.